Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFiorio. I'm your host for the show, and of course, I'm happy you are here, always honored, and never, ever do I want to take for granted that you have lots of options to listen to content in the world of coffee, so it's an honor that you've come here to listen to me. And so if you want to be updated with all new episodes and content, go ahead and subscribe to the show. That really helps the show. It gets it out there in front of more people. Also, sharing the episodes or clips on social media greatly helps the show as well. So all of you who have already done that, thank you so much. Now, I also want to draw your attention to Keys to the Shop as a consulting business. I have worked for the last almost 10 years one-on-one with coffee shop owners all over the world to help them build better coffee shops, to help them start off on the right foot. If you need a coach, a member of your starting team, if you need somebody to come in, work with you and your leaders to make your cafe or cafes better, this is what I do full time. And so if you appreciate the insights of Keys to the Shop and the philosophy that you hear as you listen to these episodes, and you want to dive deeper and get some practical applications for your specific business, Keys to the Shop Consulting is what you should be thinking about. So email chris@keystotheshop.com. Let's have a conversation, see where it goes, and maybe you and I will be working together soon. So that's chris@keystotheshop.com. I want to talk to you a little bit about our sponsor today. That is the Pacific Barista Series. So pacificfoodservice.com. Check that website out, and you'll see all of the different selections that they have to offer for plant-based beverages that will satisfy all your customers' needs. They've been doing this for decades. They've been dedicated to baristas for decades. All this product is made for baristas, tested by baristas, stands up to the heat from steaming, is great texture, great focus on flavor balance, and you should just try it for yourself. The Barista Series can be ordered on the website, pacificfoodservice.com, and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages for your customers, check out the Barista Series from Pacific. Okay, everybody, so today I want to talk about when to quit. And this is kind of a continuation of some thoughts that we've had on the show before, where we discuss why managers don't need to do it all. And baristas, you don't need to fall on the sword. You don't need to make up for the lack of resourcing and communication perpetually. And sometimes it's really difficult to understand that it is okay to move on, especially when you're somebody who deeply, deeply cares about coffee, about service, and you feel the gradual growth of disillusionment happening in your heart, in your mind. And eventually it becomes some sort of a, what was said on a show a long time ago, it's this moral injury in a sense. And so the injury is that you come in with ideas about what this is going to be like. And to some degree, that is, everybody, every one of us has ideals about what this is going to be like. The fact that it's different, harder, doesn't match up with your expectations, that doesn't automatically make it toxic. It doesn't even mean it's wrong. Just the same as your coffee shop is not doing a bad job just because it doesn't look like what your business plan said it was going to look like. It's just a way of the reality that when you start working on something and in something, the actualization of it is going to be different than your idea of it before you were involved. That's just the way it is. And you bring yourself to the table, by the way. You, in your work in the coffee shop, you are not perfect. They are not perfect, and you are not perfect. So the preamble here, I guess, the caveat, if you will, is that hard work is hard. Being tired at the end of the day is normal. Having to overcome challenges is normal. But there is a point past which you don't necessarily need to feel like you need to perpetually be in that environment. You can learn lessons from the worst of environments, and some of us can't move on to another job, and we can't quit. And so we're forced to take on this mindset of what can I learn while I'm here, at least to make the best of a bad situation. Now, if you have the opportunity to move on, and I would hope that you do, it's going to be probably for a few reasons that I think I want to talk about today. And I think these are reasons that when you listen to this, if you're a boss, if you're an owner, these are things you should always be paying attention to in how you supply your staff with an environment where they don't want to be seeking another job, unless you want them to. Because sometimes people quit because they don't like a place they work because it's not the right fit. And that's not because the boss did something bad. It's not because the business is bad. It's just not the right fit. Apples and oranges. Okay, be it they don't believe in the values of the business necessarily. They don't believe in the way that the work is done. And it's not to say that the business is wrong or that the barista is wrong. It's just that we're trying things out until we find the right fit. Now, there are some very wrong things that happen in coffee shops, of course. There's all sorts of reasons why you need to have policies against discrimination and harassment and the things like this, right? Where it can be easily in a public-facing environment and behind the bar, under pressure, with authority being mixed in with the culture, things can become toxic, and there's abusive language, or there's abusive situations or dangerous situations. Okay, so these are the things that I'm going to be talking about a little bit. And that is starting with the idea of a boss or bosses who are aggressively power hungry, obviously do not care about the staff, obviously don't take any kind of feedback well, are very defensive, and are rather immature. They rule with their authority as a tool to manipulate. They use their authority to shut down conversations rather than to facilitate conversations. Now, it needs to be said that just because people don't do what you want, if you gave feedback to the owner or a manager and they didn't do what you suggested, that doesn't mean they're blowing you off necessarily. It just means that maybe it wasn't the right idea or the right thing for the company. So you don't conflate a lack of doing what you said as a lack of listening. The opportunity to speak to those and give feedback safely to those who have authority and power, that is a good sign. And that kind of environment is what we would call a feedback culture, someplace where the owners and the managers are secure enough with themselves to not have to pretend to be perfect or to shut down conversation, to have their authority threatened. So people with this kind of an insecurity, if you find yourself being the employee of such a person or people, and that the leadership culture is really just about dictate, and there is really no interest in creating an environment of feedback, then you need to get out of there and you need to leave as soon as you possibly can, and find a place where at least leadership understands what leadership is. And so this is going to obviously increase the problem of turnover, but here's the thing. Some turnover is justified, of course. Baristas don't have to stay in environments that are damaging to them. Baristas are not required to simply put up with the immaturity, the inconsistencies, the unfair treatment, favoritism, nepotism, manipulation, shut down conversation, that kind of stuff from bosses. And they do, though, sometimes, again, because they can't find another job. And so they have to stay where they are. And in that case, what happens is they try to do as much as they can to look out for the well-being of their coworkers. And that collective response is something that you could still have. You want a culture of people who look out for each other, but not as a in spite of reflex. hey, we're not getting what we need from these people who write the schedules, who write the paychecks. They're not giving us the tools we need to grow. They're not giving us the tools we even need to do the job, basically. The schedule's always messed up. We're getting late paychecks. They were super defensive. They were actually a little, stop short of like calling me names when I was trying to like suggest ways to make the bar better, that kind of stuff. Small, petty people shouldn't own coffee bars. Okay. And hopefully, and I say this in all sincerity, bosses who are like this probably should go out of business. And if you find yourself kind of thinking maybe I'm like that, I hope that you have some kind of a come to Jesus moment where it's like, now is the time where you need to do an about face. And there's been plenty of times where I've seen some radical changes happen in bosses and management, and it's a grace. It's a great opportunity for you to actually do what we talked about in a shift break a long time ago that was titled, I'm sorry. Apologize for what you have done. It doesn't diminish your authority. And if you're afraid of that, then you're putting all the emphasis on the wrong thing. The preservation of your authority is not, it is not the purpose of your position. The distribution of your authority across the business for the benefit of other people, to grow them and their ability to do a fantastic job for the customer, for each other, and of course then the business. That's the point of it. And so even the presence of worrying about your leadership by admitting fault is that worry is proof that you have a warped view of authority and leadership. And it is simply a human way of looking at it. I don't think a barista is above this inclination. I think they think they're above it sometimes because they're not bosses. They don't own companies, and they've never really been tempted by that because they don't have authority. But you give the average barista the title of boss and owner, and you'll see how quick they start to realize, oh crap, like this really is, it's a real temptation and an impulse because it's a unique situation. So to find yourself in. So if this is you and you've found yourself being in defensive mode, you're a dictator of a person in the coffee shop, you have a heavy hand, and you find yourself being embittered towards your staff and denigrating them, throwing them under the bus. And the conversation is rarely about your own personal growth. It's always about how you can't find good help. It is a very serious situation you find yourself in right now. The stability of your business is at risk, and worse, the stability of the people that you employ is at risk, because what you're doing is you're spreading a certain kind of a toxicity that's going to last a long time in people's lives, because we all remember bosses that we had that we didn't like because of things they did and mistakes they made. I have made mistakes myself in management and in training that I wish I could take back. Heavy-handed tactics of training that basically was just like all about competition level minutia and not really seeing the person behind the process. And it was something that I grew out of. Unfortunately, it meant that in the moment I was not helping people, I was actually hurting people, even though I thought that I was helping, because I didn't see people. I just saw what I thought needed to happen. And you can expand that out to other areas of the business. It doesn't have to be a trainer who's trying to like get everybody to do the exact right thing all the time. It could just be the boss who, doesn't even really have SOPs, but wants people to read their mind, and always gets down on people but never lifts them up. These are the kinds of things that they feel like it's a death by 1,000 cuts, and that's what causes people to quit. That's actually, and I'm going to encourage you, if you're a barista, you find yourself working for one of these people, quit. Get out of there as soon as you can. And by doing so, you not only save yourself from further, harm in that situation, you maybe send a message to that boss, hopefully, that they're not going to be able to perpetually keep people because it's still a voluntary situation. You have the ability to stay or to go. And you got to look out for your long-term best interest. Now, I want to reiterate something, which is that, again, sometimes the difficulty of a job is a factor that is just baked into the job itself. We will feel tired. We will feel there will be challenges. And it is true that I think sometimes baristas can, just like maybe a boss that is insecure, a barista who is insecure interprets normal things to be abnormal. So you really got to sit down and think and get counsel from others as well. Is this a situation that I think it is, or is it me? And I think plenty of times it's not just you. It's actually the situation. And I have quit jobs like that before where I knew there wasn't a future in there for me. Now I want to wring out every drop of experience I can. And today I'm glad in some fashion, I'm glad that I worked in difficult, crappy jobs because it made me appreciate really good ones that were still challenging but were healthier. And it taught me how to not get into a business and have it be some kind of a replacement for meaning in my life. Like I personally am responsible for delivering meaning myself. Like I don't want to work for a coffee shop and say, hey, I'm just an empty vessel. Can you fill me with meaning and purpose? Because that's just a recipe for me to be disappointed. In the same way, the boss can do the same thing by requiring that all the staff, the customers, and the way the coffee shop runs is some kind of a replacement for having a mature outlook on life and being a mature individual. You can't. It is work. It is a business. It is not. I know we have mission, vision, and values, but we can't get so deep that it becomes like our great spiritual pursuit. It is something that does need to be held at arm's length in a sense. This is why I kind of rail against the idea that we are a family. It is such a weird thing to talk about. It is not something I would recommend any boss use as a term to describe their staff because you aren't a family. And if you were, I wouldn't be bragging about it because it's probably even more challenging for you if that's the case, if you work with your family. People don't like their family sometimes. Feelings of familiarity and being familial with people, that's something that you let me decide if I feel that way about you. You don't get to tell me that that's what we are. That's a personal, individual definition that is opted in circumstance by circumstance. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means, hey, this really is a business. It really is a job. And because of that, if we all come to the table with a professional view of what we're doing, then we can avoid these reasons to quit, right? So baristas, you can come in with a professional mindset and you can determine ahead of time, is this place a place that has a professional mindset? And are they investing into that professional mindset? Or is this the kind of place, like if you move from one toxic environment to the next, it's only because you don't know what to look for in the next job. Just like the owner who hires the wrong barista every single time has not learned from the first example of that staff member. They're like, okay, well, how do we improve the next hire? That doesn't enter into the conversation. Similarly, a barista who just kind of goes from cafe to cafe and experiences the same kind of bosses, the same kind of problems, they're basically not hiring the right cafe to work for, if you want to put it that way. I think baristas need to be way choosier about where they work and investigate a lot more deeply the proof of the values that they claim to have. Because everybody today claims that they have these types of values, but the proof is in the pudding, right? It's in the how well is that value extracted into the espresso shot of the operations, right? So if you do quit a job where it is just like, man, I am so tired of this person as a boss and this owner who is constantly just blame shifting, gaslighting, there's whatever legit toxic thing is happening there. How are you going to make a better decision next time? Now, the answer to the question that I had there was you need to start making better decisions according to what you're going for in your professional development. So as my friend Scott Barlow says, you need to happen to your career. You need to be the catalyst that causes the change and the positive momentum in a good direction and good trajectory for your own career. You can't just lay yourself down in the industry and say, somebody move me to a good place. You're in charge of moving yourself to a good place. And bosses, owners, you're in charge of hiring people according to a match of values, trajectory, and goals. That way, it's a virtuous cycle. It's a symbiotic relationship, and there's a lot more you can do together. Even if they don't work for you for a long time, it's productive, it's healthy, it's great. Next step for a barista who quits a job where there's that kind of toxic environment is to find one that's not that way. But you got to know what to look for. And in a similar way, as I talk to and coach owners to figure out what your values are and then what it looks like in action, you've got to be able to look at a coffee shop more than just saying, well, my friend works there and they say it's great. I wouldn't even trust your friend, honestly, because they might be going through their own unique set of negotiations internally where they're sort of like, yeah, I need this job and it's not that bad. And then they say, yeah, it's great to work here. And they're not even really thinking about it. But then when you get in, you're like, why did you say it was great to work here? It's not. Okay. And the more we can put power back into and give permission to people to, I'm not saying to quit everything that's challenging. In fact, I think also, you need to ask yourself, is it challenging because you're toxic? Maybe you're the one who is the problem and you're just doing the same thing you think other people are doing, which is blame shifting. You're saying, well, it's the company, but maybe you're not the great barista you think you are. I used to think I was the world's gift to coffee when I was a new barista, and, write-ups and, one-on-ones and obvious errors made me realize quickly that I was not. And that the issues, the biggest problem sometimes with careers is that everywhere you go, there you are. Okay. So this kind of encouragement to quit a place like this needs to also be balanced with the idea that you've done some personal exploration about, well, maybe it is something that I'm doing. Just like a leader, a boss, when they see that their staff are not doing the SOP, the first thing that you can easily jump to is, well, they're not doing it because they're lazy, but maybe the SOP is unreasonable. Maybe the manager didn't communicate it the right way. We need to go through that examination process to figure out and eliminate possibilities before we start to put emphasis on, well, this company is toxic or that barista is lazy. Right? So it's the same kind of step-by-step process that we need to critically examine what's going on. What are the factors that can contribute to this? Is it true that this person is a bad boss? Or is it possible that I'm just not putting in the effort to hear them or to do what they're saying because I personally don't like their style, but it's not technically toxic. It's just, I don't know, something petty that I have, okay? But if you're honest, it won't take a very long time to figure this out. And if it turns out to be, this is just kind of like a badly run company, they don't, they're not consistent, they're not fair, this toxic, all that, then you need to start putting that resume out there, start looking for other work. I've done this before, and it's something that actually makes the industry better because it concentrates talent in places where that talent can be recognized and rewarded and resourced the way it should be. So that's kind of the first negative kind of environment that you would say, well, I got to quit. But I want to emphasize that not every time that you should quit is a time where you are dissatisfied. Sometimes you should quit a job because a better opportunity comes and it sucks. And you love your coworkers, you love the boss, you love the company. I know scores of baristas who look back fondly on past jobs and they would love to have continued to work there, but their bills got too high. The company could not pay them more. They needed to move on to something else, maybe not even as a barista or in a coffee shop, maybe into green coffee or into espresso machine tech or sales and these kinds of places where there's more money, basically. That's not a wrong reason to quit your current job. I mean, it's a great reason, in fact. It's also a great reason when you want to pursue the next level of professional development. If all along the way of your career, you've always wanted to own a coffee shop, for example, and you've been working for as a barista for a coffee cart for a very long time, or a very small coffee shop, they've already got a manager, and it doesn't look like that person's leaving anytime soon. They've been there for years. It's established. There's no upward trajectory in this business. It would be unfair to you and to the world of coffee that would benefit from you being a coffee shop owner or manager to stay there and just be a barista because you felt this place of loyalty to this company. It may force the company to get better at hiring by you leaving. You don't have to feel too bad about it. First of all, the company's not going to go and fold just because you leave. I know sometimes when we're upset when we leave, we think, well, this place is going to crumble without me. It won't. It probably won't. Even if you bring a few baristas with you and customers that love you are just like, oh, screw this place, we're just going to leave. You don't have that much power, probably. And if you leave positively, even if you leave, you're a really great worker, not to diminish your contributions, but the company will survive without you. They're going to miss you and you're going to miss them, and it's okay. And it's going to be tearful, and you can write little notes and stuff and postcards, whatever you do, sign the yearbook. But then it's the next step. But that's a natural evolution. It's a closing of one chapter and the opening of a next. You get a positive referral. You go work for a company that's larger because they have managerial positions available. You get maybe a job in green coffee, or you do something else in coffee, right? But the whole time what you're doing is you're purposefully developing the next skill and putting yourself in a position to develop that next skill. It's a great reason to quit a job. Even the word quit, let's just use the word move on, right? I think we can say quit might be a little bit more like, haha, screw this, I quit. And moving on is more like, gosh, I really wish I didn't have to, but I'm going to have to move on. That's a little bit more positive, I suppose. But you do have to put your 2 weeks in at some point. I've put my 4 to 6 weeks in before because I was a manager. I was a higher up position, and I needed to respect the fact that the place I was leaving needed to fill that position. And some places need you to train the next generation of manager. If you're a GM and you need to sort of have some kind of a succession plan in place. In fact, if you're an owner listening to this, I would just kind of say, if you hire somebody in a high level position where there's a lot of leverage and their fingers are in a lot of places in the business, right? It'd be a great idea to have them from the jump agree that if they move on, that there's a succession plan where they have to help you. The expectation is they help you train the next person who fills that position. Of course, that's always going to be, if you don't want somebody to stick around too long if they're leaving on bad terms, but it's not a bad idea. And, for baristas, they put in a 2-week notice and that's fine. But for places that have managers or GMs and high level positions that impact a multitude of different areas of the business, when you quit, you need to consider that. Don't burn bridges unless it's those other places, right? Even still, I think that in quitting in any circumstance, you need to remain as humble as possible and not grow embittered. One of the worst things that happens in coffee is that we develop the habits of the people that we don't like because we're focused so much on them that our subconscious takes it on. Like you might have a bad boss and you quit that job. But because it was your first coffee job, it's imprinted on you that that's what a boss is. So when you become a manager, all of a sudden you start talking like that, or you start making decisions like that, because it's the only exposure to that role that you've had. Because we weren't protecting ourselves during that time. We were allowing that influence to sort of settle in subconsciously. And that's kind of an insidious thing, but it's kind of like when you grow old and you're just like, gosh, I sound like my dad. It's similar. Right? So what you need to, again, do is determine ahead of time that you're not going to be manipulated or negatively impacted by past events, past the point that you are exposed to them. Otherwise, that bitterness determines the course of your career. It cuts off opportunities. It kind of ruins the future, and that power that you didn't want to be around, you actually never quit. You just brought it with you. Now you can have a conversation with a young barista and say, "Hey, when I was starting, this is what happened, and don't do that. Don't fall for this. Here's what to look for." These are great things. You can mentor somebody based on the negative experiences you've had, but don't give bad situations more power than they deserve. But don't ignore them so much that you stay in the situation longer than you need to. And again, with quitting, the opposite spectrum of this is the positive quitting, the moving on. I want to develop my career more. I've reached the level that I can get to, and that's as far as I can get. And I need to move on to the next part of the journey. And maybe I move on to the next part of the journey. It has nothing to do with coffee. In fact, most people do. Most baristas don't stay in coffee. And we're just like, oh, why? If only. No. Turnover is a blessing in multiple ways, one of which is you can continue to get better at hiring. Two, if you've developed people well, and those people quit, they put their 2 weeks in and they move on and they become like a veterinarian, or, they work for the UN or something. I don't know what they do, but they teach trumpet to junior high kids. This job could have been such an incredibly impactful time for them. And you did good work. Just because they didn't stay in coffee doesn't mean that you did bad work. We want people to quit for the right reasons, and reasons that are good for them, and look back on their employment. And we as baristas want to look back on our employer and say, that was a good experience. So there's a positive and a negative kind of quitting. And I think we just covered a few of those different ones. But I want to give you permission, if you don't give yourself permission. Each one of those situations, whether it's on the negative side or getting out of a bad situation, or this positive side where you're kind of moving on to something else that makes more sense for you and where you're going, that you ultimately need to happen to your career. You need to be the person to determine those things and grow in your own personal maturity. Because at the end of the day, the only person that you can fully control is yourself. And I think that's a huge thing for those of us who feel the impulse to serve. If you're a hospitality-focused barista and you have that impulse to serve, it's less likely for you to be decisive, because you're going to maybe put up with something too long, or you're going to stay in a situation too long. It's not good for you, even though it's a positive place, but you needed to move on like 6 months ago because you thought, I don't want to do that to my boss. I want to stay here as long as I can, because it's almost like a pity move for them or a sacrificial move on your part. In each case, you need to make a decision, and it's okay to quit in those situations. And if you decide that you want to stay on in those positive situations, great. Maybe coffee is the career for you. Last thing I'll say here is to bosses and owners. We have episodes in the show notes. We always do recommended next episodes to listen to. And I would recommend you listen to them. That's why I put them there. And it's all about how you can set up yourself and your business to be a place that is not toxic, where there is good leadership, where people are taken care of, resourced, right? And baristas, there are episodes there that are going to talk about reasonable expectations and the part that we all have to play in creating an environment where we want to be, where it's positive and healthy. That's what we want, right? So anyway, I wanted to talk about this today, about quitting, when to quit, and why it's okay to quit. You're not giving up necessarily, you're moving on. And in both situations, I hope that your next step is a good one. So thanks, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that. And if you have any questions or comments, you can email chris@keystotheshop.com. You can also use that email if you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting and coaching. You might be dealing with some of the situations right now. Owners and operators, let's talk. There's things we can do to improve your culture. There's things we can do to make a healthy business that cares for people. This is what we focus on in Keys to the Shop. And so email chris@keystotheshop.com. All right, so that's it. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you here next time. I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.